You're listening to the Vocabit podcast, where I help students improve their vocabulary for the SAT, ACT, and life itself using my unique and research-backed story-based method. On this podcast, I'm sharing the best tips and tricks for a more enriched vocabulary and pain-free test day. Hello, and welcome to episode number 11 of the Vocabit podcast. I'm Erica Abbott, a former English and history teacher, the author of the young adult novel Ahead of Her Time, and the founder of the vocabulary company Vocabit. So it is April 21st as I record this, and we are still grappling with the COVID-19 pandemic. Certain industries are tentatively scheduled to reopen in the coming weeks, but many states, including mine, Texas, have already stated that schools are going to remain closed through the end of the year. Because the Vocabit podcast was largely born out of these school closures, I wanted to provide more free ways to connect with people and help students continue their learning outside of the classroom. I felt like it would be a good time to reassess where we are. This is no longer a short-term 2-week situation. This is now, for many people, a long-term, several-month situation. And at the beginning, we mainly talked about your mindset. How do you power through these 2 weeks? And I gave you some advice about how your brain is like a computer. If you change the phrasing of the questions that you ask it, you can get wildly different results. So if you ask, why is this so annoying? Your results and your life are going to look a lot different than if you ask, how can I make this less annoying? And while staying positive is so important, it's also time to step back and look at your overall plan, knowing that now, for many of us at least, this is a long-term situation. There was a line in Homeland that I thought was very appropriate for this. Saul talked about how in Afghanistan, we often planned our strategy in 1-year increments. So we didn't fight a 10-year war, but a 1-year war 10 times. And I think that's actually pretty comparable here, and it's such an easy pitfall to fall into. Many of us, through no choice or fault of our own, have been living in 2-week increments. At first, everything was closed for 2 weeks, then another 2, then we'll start reopening some things in another 2. So it can be really easy to fall into that same trap, to continue using the plan that you originally made, even though that plan was for a 2-week shutdown, not a 3-month one. If you knew that your school was going to be closed for 3 months, not 2 weeks, would you be doing the same things that you're doing now? Maybe you would, and that's amazing. But if you haven't yet taken a second to reassess, now is the time. There are some families who are just on the verge of exhaustion from wearing all the hats. They're working from home and schooling from home and doing quarantine crafts and keeping the house clean and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it might be worth taking a minute to think, how can we make this a little bit more sustainable for the long term? Can we, I don't know, maybe combine some of the quarantine crafts with things that already need to get done? Maybe today's activity is that the kids get to cook a gourmet meal for dinner. How can we combine some of the things that need to get done anyway to make life a little less stressful? There are other families who went into the shutdown very differently and more or less treated it as an extended spring break. And I want to be very clear that I am not judging or shaming anyone. I'm just sharing that this has been another approach. There is a tweet, I will link to it in the show notes, with 45,900 likes from March 12th. It reads, quote, I'm just going to say this and judge me all you want. We are not planning anything educational for our kids. Homeschool will not happen. We will survive and watch too much TV. We will eat cookies and carbs and hope for the best. We will love and try not to go insane. End quote. If that's still working for you, great. But my suspicion is that while that might have been fun for 2 weeks, sitting on the couch and eating cookies for 3 months might not be in everyone's best interests. And it might be time to do a little intentional reevaluation. In every case, each family needs to do what is right for them, and each situation is going to look completely different. And I'm not here to tell you how that should look for your family. What I would suggest is avoiding the pitfall of continuing your 2-week plan without giving it another look to make sure it's sustainable for your current situation. One of my favorite TV shows is The Durrells and Corfu. It's about a mom from England in the 1930s. It's a true story. She basically got sick of their drab, boring life and uprooted the family and moved them to Corfu, a Greek island. I'll link to it in the show notes. I'm pretty sure it's free on Amazon right now. But when they got to Corfu, she basically let the youngest son, Gerald Durrell, run around with wild animals all day. Now, everyone's situation is different, and that's not something that everyone should do. We need all types, but it worked out for their family. And Gerald Durrell went on to become one of the most well known conservationists of the 20th century. There are entire species that would not exist if not for him. Every family needs to decide what is best for them during these extraordinary times. But I do believe it's a mistake not to go into it intentionally. Don't just continue your 2 week plan if you're looking at a 3 month situation. We will get through this, we always do. But until that time, to finish the year strong, you need to be intentional about it. What do you want this next month to look like? Go forth and make it happen. I'll be back on Tuesday with another vocabulary boosting short story. I know I took a little bit of an interruption from that today to share some more kind of timely, overarching advice. But I will be back on Tuesday with another vocabulary boosting short story. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss it. And if you're enjoying it, please give it a 5-star review. All right, I will see you on Tuesday.